Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. I am Kashif Kamran. The Advanced Audit and Assurance exams for June 2023 are just 5 days away, and I thought this is the right time that I should discuss with you the key exam tips. Now, these key exam tips are just for the purpose of reinforcement so that you are all aware of the recent changes, recent amendments, recent developments, and that can immensely contribute towards your success in the upcoming exams. So let's start unfolding the key exam tips for the June 2023 exams. Now, the first thing is what to expect in terms of the June 2023 exam paper. We need to do a careful evaluation of the recent trends of the paper, particularly since the September 2022 exams, since when lots of things have changed in the AAA paper. And as a student appearing for the June 2023 exams, you should all be well aware of the changes and of the developments which has taken place in the AAA paper since September 2022 exams. So I will be focusing on that, and I'll try to build up my expectations around the upcoming exam paper. Let's get to it. Now, in terms of the recent developments, first of all, since September 2022 exams, examiner has changed the way a risk question is being asked in the question number 1. Significant business risk. The term significant is very important, and I will be emphasizing more on it shortly. Then is to evaluate and prioritize significant audit risk or the risk of material misstatement. Again, the emphasis here is on two terminologies. One is significant and one is prioritized. Again, I will be coming back to it shortly with more deep analysis on both the terminology, significant and prioritize. Then quality management holds the key since it has been introduced recently in the last few months. We have seen revision of ISQC 1, which has now been replaced with ISQM, International Standards of Quality Management. And the examining team has written articles on the amendments under the syllabus area C. And since then, it has been regularly examined in the AAA paper. So I foresee this trend to continue in the upcoming exams as well. And even finding a question on quality management in the June 2023 exams should not be anything unusual. Methods relating to accepting an engagement. You're very familiar with this question, which comes in the AAA paper, where you are asked to evaluate the methods in accepting an engagement. But I believe that under the syllabus area F, examining team has written 2 articles on assurance on social, environmental, and sustainability information since September 2022 exams. And a question on this topic seems likely in terms of examining team asking you a typical question connecting with social, environmental, and sustainability information, matters relating to accepting an engagement, and the procedures. So it should be very relevant for all of you that you have read this article under the syllabus area F, and there are 2 parts of this article under syllabus area F. If you read through this article, you will be very clear with the matters you should be considering in the exam paper and the procedures you should be performing. And then, just like the September 22 mock exam, we have seen in the June 23 mock exam published by ACCA, a question for like 8 marks on climatical risk and the auditor responsibility at the planning stage of the audit. And I have covered a video on climatical risk and auditor responsibility when this question appeared for the first time in September 22 mock exam. And that video is available on my YouTube channel, so you can just brush over that. And if you are my regular student, you have this video on the portal where you are accessing the course. Now, this is something where expectations can be developed, or these are some areas which are in terms of recent developments. So finding something on climatical risk and auditor responsibility in the upcoming exam, or finding a question on methods, relating to accepting an engagement on social, environmental, and sustainability information and procedures, or a quality management question. These are areas where expectations are high. Quality management is something for sure, because this is like a more regular feature now of the AAA paper since September 2022 exams. And the first two is the default feature of the AAA paper, that in the first question, you get a question on risk. And the way the question on risk is now put in is with the terminology of significant and prioritize, which needs to be carefully considered if you need to pass your upcoming exam paper. And I will be emphasizing on them shortly. Now, moving on from the recent developments, let's do a deep scan of the question number 1. And you know this holds the key in your success in the AAA exams. So let's do a deep scan of the first question. Now, section A has one question and is very organized in terms of the requirements being asked for in the first question. We are not doing any question spotting here, but you know that the AAA paper is so well organized and so well structured, you exactly know what comes in section A and B. And if you have practiced the recent 5 or 6 papers on the practice platform, you will be aware of that yourself. Now, this question worth 50 marks, which includes 40 technical and 10 professional marks, is set at the planning stage. The answer to the question number 1 is given in the format of a briefing note, for which there are 4 professional marks related to communication skills. What should a student do to fetch the 4 communication skill marks? Now, if you want to fetch these 4 communication skill marks, which are pretty easy, what you need to do is you need to format your answer in a briefing note structure. You give a heading briefing note, then you give to, from, subject, date, then you give introduction of the briefing note, and then you start answering the requirements in the order A, B, C, D. And after the requirement on evaluate the significant or evaluate the significant business risk or evaluate the significant audit risk, you should give a conclusion after the risk part. So for example, in the A part, you have business risk, and in the B part, you have audit risk. So you will give conclusion immediately after the B part, and I will tell you what exactly you need to give in that conclusion. Adhering to the partner instruction is also part of the communication skill marks. If the partner is saying that you should use a certain exhibit, or the partner is saying you should use all exhibit, or if the partner is saying you should not do this, you should adhere to the instructions of the partner carefully. Even in the first question, in the partner email, the partner wants you to calculate a materiality on a certain benchmark. So if you adhere to the instructions of the partner, you present the answer in a logical manner, A, B, C, D. You do give a conclusion. You do give a structure of the briefing note. This is all what contributes to taking the 4 communication skill marks. The next thing, the significant part of the 40 technical marks, perhaps roughly 50 to 60%, is utilized on a requirement relating to evaluation of significant risk, whether that is a business risk, audit risk, or risk of material misstatement. And sometimes we see both, the part A asking for business risk and the part B asking for audit risk. For the remaining 10 to 15 marks in the question number 1, other aspects of the syllabus are covered in, and I will be going deep inside into the other aspects and the business risk and the audit risk. Now let's move on and let's analyze the risk, which is the mainstay of the first question, in terms of the recent changes which have come in the way the requirements are put in for a risk question. Business risk first, and let's see, are we meeting the examiner expectation in the upcoming exam? Now, business risk requirement ask you to evaluate significant business risk. Expect 2 things from the student. One is to evaluate, one is the significance. Now, what a student should do to ensure that you have answered this requirement as per the expectation of the examiner. Number one, evaluating a business risk with each worth 2 marks needs a depth of explanation like 3 to 4 sentences per risk to meet the criteria that the business risk is well evaluated. Depth. It is the depth which is something equals to evaluation. So the depth of your analysis, 3 to 4 sentences on a business risk, will means that you have done justice to evaluation. It will not just fetch you the technical marks, but you will also fetch professional marks for analysis and evaluation if each risk is well evaluated. Now, each risk explained should address what is the risk basically, or what may go wrong. So if you identify a risk relating to that the company imports the raw material, for example. Now, if the company is importing the raw material, what is the risk basically? The risk might be some trade restrictions might come in the future. What may go wrong? There could be exchange rate exposure, volatility in exchange rates. We know there is a lot of lead time when you import raw material from another country. There could be some political disturbances in the other country, which increase your lead time, and you might come into a stock out situation. So there could be a lot of maybe here. There could be a lot of possibilities here. You need to choose one. So what is the risk basically if the company is importing the raw material? That is very, very important. What may go wrong if they're importing the raw material? That's what you're thinking when you're explaining the risk. Because a lot of time, the business risk is developed on the grounds of maybe or what if. Because examiner will give you a situation and you need to develop the situation into a what if. And what is the implication? If the company is importing raw material and there are possibilities that some sort of political disturbances or might increase the lead time or a stock out situation for the company, or the exchange rate volatility might have a negative impact on your profitability or on your profit margins. What is the implication? The implication on the company's cash flows, implication probably on the company's profitability if they are importing raw material, because at times import is a bit costly and that cost can put a pressure on your profit margins. So impact, implication of the business risk on the business objectives like profitability, like liquidity, like cash flows to fetch the 2 marks. So evaluate the risk. If, for example, the company is importing raw material and you are talking about that import is costly and it put pressure on your margins, but a clever student will see the financial statements of the company if given, and in the financial statement, you have the data available to calculate the profit margin. And a student cleverly calculates the profit margin, and he saw from the calculation that from the last year to this year, the profit margin has gone down by 4%. So he believes, now my point is well justified. If I'm saying because imports are costly, they will put pressure on your profit margin, and a good student says it puts a pressure on the profit margin, which has already been down by 4% over the last year. Now see the evaluation coming here. Your evaluation needs to be in depth. So if you are connecting numbers to justify your implications where possible, not necessarily every time the number gets connected with your implication, where it gets connected and a clever student use them in the exam pressure, in that nervous time in the exam hall in the 195 minutes, if you can take all such decisions are not just adding value to your technical marks, but are also fetching you professional marks for judgments, analysis, and evaluation. If you are writing the impact of the business risk on the business objective, like the profit margins will reduce, or the profit margins have already reduced over the last year by 4%, you're also demonstrating your sound understanding of commercial acumen. Because commercial acumen in a business risk scenario is to relate the business risk with the impact on the business objectives. So if you say the business reputation will be affected or the profitability may fall down, these are all commercial acumen. These are all examples of commercial acumen. So in the first question of the AAA paper, basically the commercial acumen is linked with the business risk and the impact of the business risk on the business objectives. Okay, the next one, number 2 for business risk. We were talking about evaluate the significant business risk. So my focus firstly was on evaluation. Now, number two in terms of examining team expectation for significant risk means that student should, when reading the case study, identify, copy paste situations giving rise to business risk. Now, for example, there is a 10 marks question and we know each business risk is worth 2 marks. So technically you're finding 5 business risks, but because you're reading through the case, the whole case, because you need to answer A, B, C, D, so you might find number of situations giving rise to business risk and you keep copy pasting them on your word processor that this is a business risk and you go on this one, this one, this one. The situations giving rise to business risk have been copy pasted on your word processor. Then you need to judge which of them are most significant ones to be put in your answer. Suppose you find 7 situations while you were reading through the case study. Now, out of 7, which 5 will you write? Which are the more significant one? You need to exercise your judgment. You will get professional skill marks for exercising that judgment on choosing the 5 you're writing and justifying why they're significant. If for any situation given which give rise to business risk, management has already put in place a mitigation or a correcting action, it will automatically lose the significance. For example, there is a risk of non-compliance, but the company has established a department which will be looking after the compliance, or has already established a department in recent years which is looking for the compliance on a proactive basis. Then automatically that risk of non-compliance is no more a significant risk. It is a risk, but not a significant risk because management has taken a correcting action for it. So sometimes the examiner do tell you that the management has taken a corrected action or is about to take it. So automatically the significance or the importance of that risk goes down. So be very realistic about reading the scenario. Significance is judged in terms of business risk impact on the business objective. Like loss of market share is a very significant risk. Impact on your competitive advantage, or something affecting your business reputation, or decline in profitability, or impact on the stakeholder dissatisfaction. Primarily those stakeholders which are very important to the business, like your major customer, like your major supplier, or like your major shareholder. So when you are evaluating a risk, or when you are evaluating the significance of the risk, the significance depends upon its impact on your objectives, and the impacts on profitability or impact on market share or impact on competitive advantage or reputation probably is more important for like a listed company than the liquidity. So the shareholders of the company will be more concerned with profitability, impacts on profitability. They will be more interested to know how the situations are impacting the profit today and in future. So I believe profitability or reputation or competitive advantage or market share is like more important business impacts, which could be treated as more significant ones in the exam paper. You are not required to arrange business risk in order of significance, as the question is not asking to prioritize them. A business risk question is not asking you to prioritize the significant risk. It's just asking you evaluate the significant risk. So you are not worried about in which order to write them, but whichever risk you are writing should be well evaluated, and the impact on the business objective has been very clearly put in. So examiner is just looking for your good, clear evaluation with a clear impact on the business objective to give you marks for business risk. You are not arranging business risk in an order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is not needed in a business risk answer. Prioritization of business risk is not needed. So I hope you can absorb this, improve your answer around business risk, and make a more impressive answer on business risk if it is examined in the June 2023 exam. Now, moving on towards the audit risk and risk of material misstatement, which is a much more important subject matter because the number of marks put on audit risk and ROM is more significant than the marks put on the business risk. So let's see how the student can meet the examiner expectation. In terms of significant audit risk or ROM, you are expected to calculate materiality based on partner requested benchmark given in the email, for which there are 3 technical marks to be grabbed. I hope you're familiar with that by watching my previous webinars, September 22, then December 22, and March 23. Again, distinction has to be made between my regular and paid students, what sort of access you have. Note, it is not required that the candidates select the identical percentage or figure, or that they provide a justification identical to that shown in the model answer. This is a very major misconception that the student believe that my materiality judgment or calculation should exactly match with the model answer. No. Examiner is looking for your judgment on materiality. Examiner is looking for example, the partner is asking you to use profit as a benchmark for materiality. So you found the range on profit 5 and 10, and then you choose 7%. So examiner is looking for your justification of 7. Why 7? Why not 8? Why not 9? So you need to provide a justification of why you choose 7 from a range of 5 to 10. So it should not be identical to the model answer, right? That is not the yardstick of success. And examining team is looking for your judgment to reward you professional marks, not just the 3 technical marks here. The question on audit risk or ROM asks the student to evaluate and prioritize the significant audit risk and ROM. So this question is expecting from student 3 things: evaluate, prioritize, significant. Let's see if we can do a deep scan of what 3 things mean here. Each audit risk or ROM is worth 3 marks each, except for the risk arising from the non-accounting situations like detection risk or internal controls. Examiner has expressed dissatisfaction in the recent examiner report on students identifying 9 risks for an 18 marks requirement for an audit risk and ROM, stating this is more than the required risk and result in lack of evaluation, depth of explanation, as the student is more focused on running after number of risk, not the explanation required, and further results in time management issues in the AAA paper. So what exactly is the examining team looking for 18 marks of an audit risk question or a ROM question in terms of evaluate and prioritize the significant risk? Let's see what the examining team is looking for. Firstly, if a requirement is for 18 marks for an audit risk or a ROM question, you straight away deduct 3 technical marks for materiality. So you're left with 15 marks to grab, and with each well-evaluated risk worth 3 marks, so you are evaluating 5 significant risks from the case. That's what you need to do, not 9 risks for 18 marks, 5. So you should know the marking scheme. You should know how things have changed structurally in the question number 1. You need 3 marks for materiality, so you deduct that, and the remaining marks you divide by 3, and you come across, okay, I need to work upon 5 of them. Now, in terms of evaluation, the examining team is looking for, firstly, the risk is well picked from the main issues in the case. Now, when you're reading the exhibits and the case study, there will be lots of main issues where the examiner is trying to draw your attention. You might see certain paragraphs where examining team is exploring or going more in depth for an accounting treatment, or trying to draw your attention through the depth of analysis been done in the case study. So you need to exercise your sound professional judgment that this is an area where perhaps the examining team is trying to draw my attention because they've written a lot more here. They've explained a lot more here, and I should be emphasizing more on this. So you need to pick risk well from the case material, the main issues, not the minor ones. Even when you look at the financial statements, at times there are note numbers in the financial statements, and each note number is then explained under. So that is also the main issues. Every note number in the financial statement is primarily a main issue, which is to be addressed by the student. Then, then the student has to judge its materiality on the basis of the materiality threshold, which you have calculated before. So you know the materiality threshold. You must have calculated materiality threshold before even you start writing the answer for audit risk and ROM. So even if you pick up a risk from a scenario and the amount is given, so you will judge immediately, is it material? Is it above the threshold I calculated? So it is an important risk in terms of being material. Then comment on the accounting treatment in terms of what is wrong in the treatment and what is defined in the standard. So you need to do two things. Firstly, you need to pick out what is wrong in the treatment adopted by the management and then telling that this is what the standard tells us. So if the management has done something wrong, try to identify what is wrong. If they haven't given a disclosure of like a related party, so you say, okay, the management has not given a disclosure of a related party transaction, and the standard requires a complete, adequate disclosure of a related party transaction in the notes to the account. So you're trying to find out what is wrong, and then you're trying to justify what the standard tells us. Or if the management has not reviewed the goodwill for impairment, then you will say that the goodwill has not been reviewed for impairment, whereas the standard tells us that it should be reviewed each year for impairment. Whether there are indicators or there are not indicators, it should be reviewed for impairment once every year. So trying to identify the wrong and relating it with what the standard defines. Comment on the risk due to the application of the wrong treatment by the management. So if the management has not given a disclosure, then the risk is no disclosure. Or if the management has not reviewed the goodwill for impairment, then the risk is that the goodwill has not been reviewed for impairment. Or you need to find the risk. The risk could be inappropriate presentation or inappropriate classification or no disclosure or inadequate disclosure, something wrongly recognized, something wrongly classified. So the risk could be in presentation, in recognition, in valuation, in classification, in presentation, or in disclosure. That is a risk. Identify what's the risk and then comment on the impact of the risk on the financial statement. If the management has not reviewed goodwill for impairment, the impact on the financial statement is that there is a possibility that the goodwill is overstated. So try to find what is overstated or what is understated. If the management has not given a disclosure of a related party, now you cannot say under an overstatement. You will say, because no disclosure is given of a related party, the financial statements are materially misstated. So where it is possible for you to identify the under and overstatement, you should give priority to this. But in some cases, you need to say financial statements are materially misstated, just like a disclosure situation I've discussed with you. So look at the bullets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what you need to do. Try to absorb them when you're listening to this video, that this is what you're doing in terms of evaluating a risk and meeting the expectation of the examiner. Okay, now moving on towards the next expectation of the examiner. When you are evaluating the risk, significant is already part of it because you must have stated it is material. So that's one way of defining significance. So you must have picked up a risk where an amount is given. So you must have judged whether this amount is material or not. So you have already started defining the significance in the very first sentence of your risk answer. But yes, for example, a related party disclosure not given, Now, over here, the significance is more qualitative. We know related party disclosures are material by nature. So automatically, again, materiality has come in, but it has come in the context of being qualitative, not quantitative here. However, there could be a risk for which examiner has not given the amount. So you can't comment on its quantitative materiality, but it could be significant because it is something the management is doing for the first time. How many times you've seen in the past paper, for example, examining team telling us that the management has introduced a share-based payment plan for the first time for its executive employees. Now you look at this statement a couple of times in the past paper that for the first time they've introduced a share-based payment plan for its employees. So for in that case, management will be applying the IFRS 2 and the accounting treatment of the IFRS 2 for the first time, which make it very significant. Because if the management is applying a new accounting standard for the first time, or they're recognizing something for the very first time, like a share-based payment expense, there is the possibility they might do some errors or misstatements because they're not aware of it. So that also makes it important. Or there is a risk of a management bias as the management bonus is connected with profits. Now, this is also very significant because if the management is involved in some, if there is an opportunity for the management to window dress the financial statements or to be biased because of a certain condition given in the exam paper, like management bonus is connected with profit, then obviously this is a very significant risk because there is a fair chances or significant chances that the profits will be overstated for the management to meet their self-interest of getting higher bonuses. Or the accounting treatment is complex. For example, some accounting treatments like employee benefits or accounting treatments like deferred taxations. Even though amount is not given, but these are very complex accounting standards, or the IFRS 7, IFRS 9 are very complex accounting standards. So at times the complexity of the accounting standard also makes it significant, even though the amount is not present, or there is a degree of uncertainty like the management estimates. Management is making an estimate. Management is determining an estimate, or management is determining a useful life of an asset, or management is determining the fair value of an asset, or management is determining the recoverable amount of an asset. Now, in all these cases, we have uncertainties, we have estimates. So we need to consider this as significant risk on the basis of uncertainty, or we need to consider significant risk on the basis of a complex accounting treatment, or on the basis of management bias, or on the basis of something being done for the first time by management, not just the quantitative materiality. Yes, doing the quantitative materiality is the easiest thing in the exam paper. So wherever the amounts are available, you will immediately judge whether it is material or not. Or for example, a disclosure, you will immediately judge this is material by nature. But what about others? So significance is not just merely the quantitative materiality in exam alone. So that is where you're coming across significant risk in exam paper. Finally comes the beauty of the computer-based exam. As you're working on a word processor, where you are putting the significant audit risk in the order. In the order you have identified them from the case study, and you evaluated 5 significant risks, for example. You now just need to exercise your judgment of rearranging them in order of the priority. Suppose you have written 5 audit risks in the order you found them in the case study. Whichever risk you found first, second, third, fourth, fifth, you wrote in that order to wrap up your answer for 5 risks. Now you've done justice with one thing. You have evaluated the significant risk in the order you found them in the case study, whether the significance was on the basis of something being done for the first time, or management bias, or being material by nature or amount, whatever. Now you just need to arrange them, because examiner is also asking to prioritize, which was not the case with business risk. Now, because the examiner is asking you to prioritize them, and that's the beauty of the computer-based exam, now you have written 5. You just need to rearrange them, bringing some risk from down to up, or some risk from up to down, just rearranging them in order of their priority, arranging 2 to 3 or out of the 5, in order of significance, will do justice. Examining team does not want that all 5 should be arranged in priority orders. No. Out of the 5, if you even arrange 2 in priority, that's fine, or even 3. That will make the examining team very happy that you've done justice with the prioritization of the significant risk. Now, you can prioritize them on the basis of the most material first, then the next, or you can first prioritize the ones which are material by amount, then the ones which are material by nature, or you can first put the ones which are material by amount, then you can put something being done for the first time like share-based payment, or you can put something something of a risk of a management bias. Even risk of management bias can come first because that is something which is affecting the overall financial statement. Detection risk in an audit risk question can be put at number 1 because detection risk relates with the auditor. So you should put it at number 1 position. Then you can bring the other risks down, like the ones which have quantitative materiality, and then you can go down in any other order. Whatever basis you choose, whether you put detection risk first, or you put risk of management bias first, or you put the quantitative materiality first, and you put the qualitative risk materiality after, whatever basis you choose of prioritizing them, rearranging them, it is your judgment. It is your judgment. And that is what the examining team is looking for. And there is no right one answer here that this should match the model answer. No. Look at the yellow bullet, number 1. You then need to give a conclusion at the end of the audit risk answer, immediately at the end of the audit risk answer, not waiting for the end of the briefing note. We no more give a conclusion at the end of the briefing note. We immediately give a conclusion right after the risk part, because you need to give a conclusion of the basis you adopted to prioritize the risk. So you need to explain your basis of judgment of prioritizing risk, as you will be fetching professional marks for judgment. So what basis? Why you put risk of bias first and then the quantitative materiality, or why you put the detection risk first and then the quantitative materiality? You need to tell this to the examiner, because you judge it. You thought of this, not me, not the examiner. So you should state in like 2 sentences the basis of your judgment to prioritize the risk, because examiner will be looking for that to reward you the professional marks for evaluation, analysis, and judgment. But this is important, right? Lastly, further, write across your answer for evaluating the risk, which I've just guided you, and write across your answer for prioritizing the risk. You have not just gained the technical marks, but a lot of professional marks around skepticism, judgment, and evaluation. You must have skeptically evaluated the management wrong treatment. You must have questioned management on wrong treatment. You must have skeptically identified situations giving risk of management bias. You must have exercised your judgments to prioritize the risk. You must have done the evaluation by writing each risk in depth of like 4 to 5 sentences. So you're not just getting the technical marks, but you're also getting professional marks. So try to ensure how you can refine your answer when it says evaluate and prioritize the significant risk. So evaluate, prioritize, significant. I hope you got hold of each one of them. So this is the key stay of the first question, where I've put much of my time into this exam tips session. The next one. Any foreseeable change in the way audit risk or risk of material misstatement requirement can be put in future exams, or we expect the same way the questions are being put in since September 22 exams, which we just saw. Evaluate the significant business risk, or evaluate and prioritize the significant audit risk. This is one way the question is being put in. Do we foresee any change coming to it? Yes, the examining team has given examples in the examiner article how to approach section A of the exam, which is published recently under the syllabus area D, as to how requirements can be rephrased. It's not change of requirement, it's just the rephrasing of requirement with still the same meaning and still the same way to answer. So the way you answer the question will not change. The meaning will remain the same. It's just examiner might rephrase the question. So you should be familiar with it, rather than you get to the exam hall and you get a rephrased question, which you've not seen in the past paper, and you get nervous. So just let's look at the rephrasing of questions, how they could be in the future exam. I'm not saying it will exactly be in the June exam, but this is how things will be in the future exams. So let's have a look at the rephrasings of the questions around risk. Number one, type 1, evaluation and prioritization of the significant risk of material misstatement. So we are all familiar with the type 1, right? We just discussed that. That's been happening since September 22. Type 2, evaluate and prioritize the risk of material misstatements to be considered in developing the audit strategy and plan. So examiner just brought the terminology audit strategy and plan. Eventually, you're doing the same answer. You are evaluating and prioritizing the audit risk, which the auditor should consider in developing the audit strategy and plan. So that's more like a professional looking requirement, bringing the jargons of the audit to it. No change the way you answer the question. In the bracket, you are not required to consider the risk relating to goodwill. We do see these happening in past papers as well, right? That examiner do ask you not to do something. And that is part of the communication skill marks, right? Because in the communication skill marks, if you follow the instructions well, you will get the communication skill mark. So if the examining team is saying you should not do this, then don't do this. So you minus the goodwill, identify the significant risk. Type 3, justify why goodwill has been identified as a significant risk of material misstatement. So in the first part, examiner was saying minus the goodwill, identify the significant business risk. And in the second part, the examining team is saying why goodwill has been identified as a significant risk. Justify. It's pretty easy. You just answering the audit risk answer. You're telling that the goodwill has been identified as a significant risk, primarily because it's material. In the context of the case study, you can find the amount, or because of the complex accounting treatment, which is the impairment of the goodwill once every year, because of the determination of the recoverable amount, which is very subjective and involve management estimates, or management can have a risk of biasness to overstate the assets. They have not impaired the goodwill. So there could be a lot of reason why goodwill is significant. It could be significant because of its amount, because of some key aspects given in the case study, like any risk of management bias, like the estimates involved in recoverable amount, like the estimates involved in the impairment, and so on and so forth. So you just need to justify why goodwill has been a significant risk. What are grounds of concluding it is a significant? So partner might tell you in the email that I have considered goodwill as a significant risk. Excluding the goodwill, identify and explain the other significant risk of material misstatement from the scenario. And then the examiner asks you that why has the partner considered goodwill as a significant risk? So you need to justify that. Design audit procedures on goodwill. We know we are very familiar with this requirement. And type 4, justify why each of the following has been identified as a significant risk of material misstatement: goodwill, inventories, and non-current. So again, you have to go back to the scenario. You will see, okay, why goodwill has been judged as significant. So you need to find the basis of judgment from the scenario. Why inventory has been judged as a significant risk. Go to the scenario, see, is it by amount? Is it by a complex accounting treatment? It could be work in progress inventory. And we know work in progress inventory is very subjective. It has lots of estimates, which itself make it risky, which itself make it a significant risk. Non-current assets. What's so special in the non-current assets which is making them significant? Is it the amount? Is it the depreciation policy? Is it the estimate involved in the useful life? What? So there could be something special which is making them significant, which you need to identify them. So questions can be put in any way. But again, the eventual answer is the same as you're putting the answer for an audit risk and ROM. But don't get distracted with the rephrasings of question. Just try to understand them right in front of your screen currently. So when you see them in the actual exam, you're not nervous. So these are possible changes which might be in the future exams, not just exactly the June 23 exam. Okay, now moving away from the risk discussion, business risk, audit risk, prioritization, significance, evaluations, possible changes in the way the question could be put in. Let's move on to the other testings in question number 1, apart from risk, which takes the most of the marks. What else beside risk? In the first question, you do see all this as well. Other areas tested in question 1 more regularly and more frequently includes ethical and professional issues arising from any request by the management in the case study, or any specific exhibit given in the exam paper. And most of the time we see using the exhibit 5 or using the exhibit 4, identify and explain the ethical and professional issues. So it could relate to something very special in the case study. Audit procedures on accounting matters, that's quite common. Matters in accepting an engagement from a client, we are very familiar with that. Examining team asking you what sort of matters will you consider if the client is requesting an engagement from you, what sort of matters would you be considering in? A lot of commercial acumen will come in there because you're accepting an engagement. So commercial acumen is about the risk and rewards. The reward is the fees. The risk is there could be some issues with client integrity or something, or you don't have competence to offer the engagement. So you need to trade off between risk and rewards to choose the right conclusion of accepting the engagement, so that your conclusion would demonstrate the commercial acumen. Matters to be considered in using the work of a component auditor or expert or internal auditor. A lot of knowledge matters in planning the first year audit. We've seen that a couple of times in past papers. Evaluating the component auditor strategy, just like I think in the March 2020 paper. That's quite a common question. We've seen a couple of times in the last 6-7 attempts. Auditor responsibility for laws and regulations or opening balances. So these are some sort of questions which have come in the recent 6-7 attempts. And again, these are other aspects you can foresee in question number 1. Okay, now moving towards the section B of the paper, a quick scan of it. Section B is very structured in terms of what is tested and have 2 questions. On the left-hand side, one of them is set at the completion and reporting stage and possibly includes questions like going concern matters, procedures, and implications for audit report seems important to me. This is my judgment. This is my estimate, might be wrong. So I foresee a question like on going concern, around going concern in one of the questions of section B, a possibility. Critical appraisal of the audit report could feature in future exams because it has remained one of the favorite question of your examining team. Reporting implications for multiple uncorrected misstatements. You must have seen a questions like such many times in the past paper. Matters and evidence in relation to accounting issues and implication for audit opinions. Again, these are very regular features of section B, asking a question on matters and evidence you should expect to find in the working papers. And for a certain accounting issue, what's the implication on the audit report? So a blend of evidence and reporting coming together, and matters to be communicated to those charged with governance. Again, I think we have seen it once in the last 6-7 attempts. So this is what makes the reporting and completion stage. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the other question in section B is mostly set around matters and procedures related to other assignments offered by the auditor. It could be forensic, it could be due diligence, it could be prospective financial information. In recent attempts, though, question around quality management has taken precedence over other assignments. So quality management is coming like a full-fledged question with ethical and professional issues. And it's in the recent attempt, it has replaced questions like prospective financial information, due diligence, and forensic. But again, both of them has an equal chance. A question on other assignments or a question on quality management is one of the questions in section B. Review of prospective financial information has been tested a lot more. I started to believe that perhaps examining team likes more the forecast and cash flow forecast or review of prospective financial information. There is a lot of liking among the examining team for prospective financial information, but care should be taken for topics like forensic and due diligence. They might reoccur anytime in the future exams. So these are 2 questions, one on completion and reporting for sure. The other one could be on quality management or other assignments. So this is a very structured looking section B where you have 20 technical marks in each question and 5 professional marks in each question. Okay, then some recent articles that should be read in the last few days ahead of exams if you have not yet read them. Recent articles and the ones that should not be avoided. So it's not just recent, it's also the ones which I believe should not be avoided. And I'm putting a list of 10 in front of your screen. Laws and regulations in section A of the syllabus. Ethics in the AAA exam, recently published under syllabus area B. International Standards on Quality Management, Part 1 and Part 2, which is the key stay of the upcoming exams in the syllabus area C. Approach to Section A question, from which I discussed a lot of things today in my key tips session, which is under the syllabus area D. Exam Technique 1 on business risk, under the syllabus area D, and I did discuss a lot of aspects from that today. Exam Technique Part 2 on ROM and audit risk. A couple of things came in my discussion today from that article under the syllabus area D. Group audits, using the work of component auditor, knowing about component auditor, knowing about who is a significant component auditor, knowing about the group auditor responsibility. This article holds importance. Going concern, considering it looks important or seems important in one of the Section B questions, so please ensure you brush over going concern. Auditor report to those charged with governance. A typical question asking you matters you should be communicating to those charged with governance. A reading of this article could be a real blessing for you. And finally, the assurance of social, environmental, and sustainability information, Part 1 and Part 2 under the syllabus area F, which holds importance in any upcoming exam. Examining team might ask you, test you this article, so don't just ignore it. So 10 articles, right? Not just the recent ones, but the ones that should not be avoided. Okay, time management for the AAA paper holds the key to success. And that's the final thing I'm discussing in terms of the key tips, because if you're not managing time well in AAA paper, the end result is failure. A lot of time on lots of platforms, I've discussed the time management, and that's the same one I'm reinforcing today as well. This is how the time management looks like. Total of 195 minutes to be divided in question 1, 2, 3, and then to be broken down into reading and planning and writing. And the rule of thumb is 1/4 of your time should be spent on reading and planning and 3/4 on writing, because the reading and planning time is the key investment. So in the first question, 24 minutes is the key investment. In the second and third question, 12 minutes each is the key investment, because understanding the requirement is half success. Getting to know what the examining team is asking is half the success. And then connecting that with the case study and finding the good answer. So investment in reading and planning time. Writing time for question 1 is 75 minutes, for 2 and 3 is 36 minutes each. And I've again emphasized a lot of time that each question has a stipulated time. You should stop when the time ends. Don't just rush after completing one question and compromise the other. Each question contributes to your success, not just one of them. So you have technically like 97, 98 minutes for the first question. And within that, whatever best you can do it. Wherever the time ends, go to the next question. Don't just excel one question. Don't just complete one question. Try to find opportunities in each of the 3 questions. Wherever the time gets ended, move on and avail opportunities. So that is the best way you can maximize your marks, even though you fail to complete like 10% of the paper. So even if you reach 90% within the 195 minutes, by going over 1, 2, 3 within the stipulated time, you've done excellent, because it's very rare you will manage to complete the 100% of the AAA paper. So what should I do from now till the day of exam? Another frequently asked question in the last couple of days I've been receiving on my WhatsApp. What should I do in the last 5 days, 6 days? It's just about revision. So revise anything you believe you are blur at. You are best judge of that. Anything you believe you are not good at, you still have a time to revise it up. Do the June 23 mock. That's very important. Go over the tips which are given to you in the session today. Just read over the 10 articles if you have not read any one of them yet. Read 2 recent examiner reports, just like a story, just to identify the shortcomings of the student and just ensure that you are not doing that in your upcoming exam on Monday. So I think that can be real good value addition for you, the number 5. Be more focused on practice, spend more time on practice in the last 5 days ahead of your June 23 exams. So wish you all success, do your best. I hope you will find this session on key exam tips productive. I've spoken a lot more on audit risk and business risk because that's the key area. That's where a lot of changes have come since September 22 exam. And I hope you can watch and concentrate on this video. You can play it at a speed of 1.5 just to save your time, and can just brush over this video and can just ensure that you are reinforcing the recent changes and the developments in your exam coming up on Monday. So once again, best of luck. Wish you all success. And I'm Kashif Kamran signing off from this exam tip session for AAA June 23 exams. Take care. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.